The most scary real stories that shock you. In 1920, an 8-year-old girl named Elizabeth disappeared in a small town. She was last seen in an old park near her house playing with a doll. The search lasted several days, but no trace was found. The residents of the city were terrified. The investigation continued for several months, but no evidence was ever found. However, a few years later, a strange rumor appeared. It was said that the doll that belonged to Elizabeth was found in the forest, and at night you can hear children laughing and crying. People began to avoid the forest and began to call it the Forest of Lost Souls. One day, a local hunter said that he saw a figure in the forest that looked like a girl in a white dress. He tried to catch up with her, but she disappeared in the dark. Since then, no one else dared to enter that forest. They say that the girl's soul remained there, and now she wanders through the forest.
Paul McCartney died in the 60s and they hired someone to take his spot.
That's crazy.
So essentially the conspiracy is that in 1966, Paul McCartney was leaving Abbey Road, you know, where the recording studio was, and he got into a car wreck that night, and that they covered it up, and that the Beatles actually held a lookalike contest for Paul McCartney, and the winner took his spot. It was one of the biggest bands in the world. They were making so much money and so many people loved them. And there's been so many little things that point to that fans have seen over the years. So the Beatles have put hidden lyrics within their music that kind of point fans in the direction. Like, for instance, there's a song called I'm the Walrus, when walrus means corpse. And then a couple years later, they released another song where John Lennon said, "Here's another clue for you all, the walrus is Paul."
Yo.
About a year after his supposed death, they came out with Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. It's a very popular album that they released. And a fan actually put a mirror halfway across the drum set where it says that, and it actually says 119 he die. Between he die, there's an arrow pointing straight to Paul McCartney.
This child had been missing for 6 years and was covered in the Netflix reboot of Unsolved Mysteries. Now, she has been found. Recently Solved Mysteries, episode 37, Kayla Unbehan. Viewer discretion is advised. Kayla Unbehan was born on January 5, 2008 to Ryan Azurka and Heather Unbehan in South Elgin, Illinois, a western suburb of Chicago. When the couple split, a judge awarded the dad, Ryan, full custody of the child. On Independence Day 2017, when Kayla was 8, she was with her mother, Heather, at an unknown location in Wisconsin for a so-called camping trip, and Heather arranged to return her the next day to Ryan at 7 p.m. at her place in Wheaton, Illinois. Unfortunately, she failed to show up, and an investigation by the police was launched. It was discovered that all of Heather's social media had been deactivated and her phone was turned off. No one was able to reach her or talk to her since that 4th of July 6 years ago. The disappearance of Kayla Unbehan remained as one of the coldest child abduction cases in the land of Lincoln during recent times. 5 years later, in November 2022, Kayla's vanishment would be featured on the reboot version of the Netflix series Unsolved Mysteries, Season 3, Episode 9, titled Abducted by a Parent. The episode included an age progression image to show what she would look like as a teenager. This led to increased awareness of the case through social media and the Bring Kayla homepage on Facebook. It wasn't until 6 months later, on May 13, 2023, where a store owner of a Plato's Closet, a store chain that sells used clothing for teenagers, identified a sighting of Kayla and her mother from the show in Asheville, North Carolina, nearly 700 miles away from her Illinois hometown. Heather, now 40, was taken into custody and is booked in the Buncombe County, North Carolina jail. She was initially held on a $250,000 bond, awaiting extradition to Illinois. However, just 3 days later on May 16th, she made bail and was released. She then turned herself in to authorities in Kane County, Illinois, where Kayla's hometown is situated in, and she was booked on an abduction charge. She appeared before a judge and was released on bond again on an electric monitoring device. Her next court date is scheduled for June 14th of this year. Ryan Azurka obtained an order of protection against Heather, and she is prohibited from being near his residence or leaving Illinois without court permission. As for Kayla, now 15 years old, she was reunited with her dad, and he expressed his joy and gratitude to the police and all of those who helped in the search. This case offered hope to investigators and families searching for missing persons, as it was unusual for someone to remain off the grid for such a long period of time.
Watcher full spoilers, here we go. The movie starts off with Julia and Francis, who are an American couple. They're moving to Bucharesti, which is the capital of Romania. Romanians, feel free to roast my pronunciation in the comments. They moved there for the husband's work, and he's also the only one who speaks Romanian. Julia's left at home a lot, and then she notices a man staring at her from the window every day. While watching the news with her husband, Julia learns that there's a serial unaliver nicknamed the Spider that's on the loose. He's known for women's heads off and watching them as their life slips away. Julia decides to watch a movie on her own, but while in the theater, she feels someone staring at her. When she looks over her shoulder, she sees this really creepy man. Frightened, she goes into the grocery store, and this guy follows her in there. The movie hasn't showed his full face yet, but you can see his paper-thin lips. Julia goes into the back rooms of the grocery store with the swinging door and hides from him, and he almost sees her. Julia escapes and then goes home to tell her husband. He doesn't seem very concerned, but he goes to the grocery store with her to look at the security footage. And then this grocery store employee looks like he couldn't give less of a fuck about the woman's fears of being followed. But he shows them the footage anyways, and she kind of gets to see the guy's face for the first time. The footage quality was almost as low as my serotonin levels, but she keeps it pushing and makes it work. Back at the apartment, Julia meets her pretty cool neighbor named Irina, who invites Julia inside to hang out. Irina tells Julia about an ex-boyfriend who comes to Irina's house a lot and knocks on her door. And although he's not technically dangerous, Irina hides a pew-pew in her drawer just in case for protection. During their hangout, you can tell that someone is watching them by the camera's POV. Then back at the apartment, Julia sees this man watching her again. This time she waves to see if he actually is watching her, and he gives a classic white man. You couldn't actually see his face, but when she tries to show her husband, of course the guy's not standing there anymore. But they get the police involved, and then the police bring the guy to Julia's house. This guy is creepy as hell, avoiding eye contact and everything. The police tell them to shake on it, that it was all just a big misunderstanding, and the guy grabs Julia's hand and squeezes it. A few days later, Julia follows the man to his work, and he works as a janitor in a club. She finds Irina there, who works as a dancer, and she expresses her concerns to her. The next day, Julia hears a thud and Irina screaming from her room. She makes the apartment managers investigate, but they don't find anyone in there. Julia still hasn't heard anything from Irina from the previous night, and then she runs into Irina's ex-boyfriend. She asks the ex-boyfriend if he can knock on the guy's door that she believes is the Watcher, but he's not in there. But then when Julia tries to leave, she sees the man coming home with a bag in his hand. Julia attends an event with her husband, and she learns that her husband has been joking with her coworkers about her being delusional. She leaves to get on the subway, but then she sees the creepy man followed her on there. He tells Julia that she completely misunderstood him and that he's just a quiet, lonely guy. He also has this really sus plastic bag. Back home, Julia gets lured into Irina's room when she hears music coming from it. When she gets inside, she finds Irina with her cut off. Then her creepy neighbor smothers her with a plastic bag. Her throat, and lies down to watch her bleed out. Julia's husband then comes home to find her missing, so he calls her. He hears her phone ringing in the opposite room, and then he walks out to see the guy stepping out of the room. Before her weak-ass husband confronts the man, Julia bang-bangs him with Irina's hidden weapon, and then this guy becomes severely injured and maybe unalived. The end.
We've talked about the Silent Hill game where the monsters change their appearance based on what your character looks at in the game. But what about its surprising twist ending? Let's once again talk about Silent Hill Shattered Memories. More obscure horror games right here. In Shattered Memories, you play as Harry Mason looking for his daughter Cheryl. While searching, the game pays attention to what you look at as well as how you answer a psychiatric evaluation. These evaluations take place from a first-person perspective in between each of the game's main stages. This is important, and we'll get to why later. Near the end of the game, you discover that Harry Mason has been dead for 18 years. But wait a minute, we're playing as him and we're even talking to a psychiatrist. In one of the game's final scenes, you see Harry Mason walk into the psychiatrist's office, where his daughter Cheryl is the one who's been being evaluated. Cheryl never allowed herself to truly accept her father's passing, and depending on which specific ending you get, she may or may not come to terms with it. There's also a videotape that plays at the end of the game. It's selected based on the choices you make, and it will show Harry as either a decent guy or the opposite of one.
If you're alone and you hear knocking on glass in the middle of the night, do not open your eyes.
Disclaimer, this is for entertainment purposes only and it's unreal. Or is it?
So the story is about a man who woke up in the middle of the night to knocking on glass. He lived alone with his dog, so he just figured the dog was making that noise somehow. As he tossed and turned, he noticed his dog was on the bed with him, and he was sound asleep. The man, however, was wide awake. This undeniable fear took over. He heard the same noise. He felt this heavy energy in the room. You know when you feel like something's not right? Something's different, and not in a good way. He knew something or someone was in there with him. He knew where to look. His window. He turned around slowly, and that is when he saw the most bone-chilling thing. A face that didn't seem to have a body was just staring at him and smiling from ear to ear. It was outside his window. It was absolutely terrifying, and he lived on the 5th floor. Follow for more.
3 mysterious videos that will leave you questioning everything.
Wild and crazy Friday night findings. We just discovered, which we already knew, that your phone, an iPhone specifically, takes an infrared picture of you with your Face ID every 5-ish seconds. And we looked at it through an infrared camera and it's pretty wild. Let's show you. Okay, have your home screen. Not touching anything. Okay, infrared lens on the camera. Boom, there was 1. 2. That's so wild. Okay, cover the camera. Oh, there's another one. Okay, nothing. Oh, it's trying. It's taking pictures of your finger. Okay, move your finger. Ready? Boom. Wild.
I think I can see it on here. Hold on. Now it's stopped. Oh, wait, there it is. See if she moves. There it is.
The dogs are ready for bed. It's just a peaceful night here. Getting ready to go to bed myself. What the fuck is that? What? Oh, God! Fuck!
The 22-year-old had been sliced in 2 at the waist and completely drained of blood. Some of her organs, such as intestines, had been removed and neatly placed underneath her buttocks. Pieces of flesh had been cut away from her thighs and breasts, and her stomach was full of feces, leading some to believe that she'd been forced to eat them before she was killed. The most chilling mutilations, however, were the lacerations on her face. The killer had sliced each side of her face from the corners of her mouth to her ears, creating what is known as a Glasgow smile.
Terrifying Games You Don't Want to Play, Part 50. The Unwelcome Guest Ritual. If you play this game correctly, you and your family will be rewarded beyond your wildest dreams. But be warned, you only have one shot at this, and if you fail, the consequences will be dire. To play this game, you will need a piece of paper and a writing utensil, a single unmarked envelope, an empty house or building of emotional significance, and 5 of your closest friends or family to help you. Once you have acquired these items, you and your guests will need to assemble at midnight in whichever room in the house you feel is the most memorable or special to you collectively. Next, on one side of the paper, you'll need to write the words, "Stranger, where art thou?" On the other side of the paper, you'll need to write the words, "We challenge thee," under which all of your guests will need to sign their names. Finally, you'll need to seal the paper in the envelope and open all of the doors and windows to the house. This will summon the uninvited guest, or the stranger, and allow the game to begin. For the next 5 hours, or until sunrise, the stranger will swap places with one of the people from your group, acting and appearing nearly identical to them. Your job will be to identify who the imposter is, writing your guess on the outside of the sealed envelope. Once the time is expired, you'll need to open up the envelope and check the names inside. The signature of the imposter will have disappeared entirely. If that matches the person that you guessed, their name will still be printed on the outside of the envelope, and you will win the game. The stranger will depart and gift each of you one wish for your troubles. However, if you guess wrong, the stranger will permanently take the place of your friend, leaving them to wither away in oblivion, tortured by the knowledge that someone else gets to live their life and die their death. Comment whether or not you would play this game and follow for more.
Okay, so are we gonna die in 8 minutes?
Okay, so the sun may have exploded and we wouldn't even know it for at least 8 minutes. Light from the sun takes 8 minutes and 20 seconds to hit Earth, meaning if the sun suddenly blew up, we actually wouldn't know for that period of time. This is because light travels faster than anything else and we wouldn't be able to hear an explosion from space. While this can cause a lot of anxiety, our sun will never explode. It doesn't have enough mass to create a supernova. A star needs to have a mass of 10 times that of our sun in order for it to explode. If the sun were to explode, it would take around 134 days for the shockwave to reach Earth. But the neutrinos and radiation travel at the speed of light and would reach us in 8 minutes and we would all die. So realistically, we can all die in 8 minutes at any given time in our life, because we would have no idea that the sun exploded in that time. This is extremely scary, not only because we would all die, but because it's completely out of anyone's control.
Terrifying things found by YouTubers. In this video uploaded to YouTube, two friends are dirt bike riding in the middle of nowhere, and they then come across something very strange. They see a girl just walking alone on the trail, and this confused them because they were literally in the middle of nowhere. And when the two friends got back home, they tried to find out who the girl was, and it turned out that it was actually missing person Carly Gus, so they straight away called the police.
This is why you shouldn't buy haunted houses. A paranormal team by the name The Fourth Wall received the case of a man who has been seeing a shadow figure inside his closet. The story goes of a man named Ishihara who bought a house at an incredibly low price, but stated clearly in the contract the previous owner took his own life in the bedroom closet, and this is the reason why the price is so low. After a few strange encounters, he decides to record himself sleep to make sure he's not going crazy. After the closet door opens on its own, his cat seems to be looking at something tall inside the closet. And after a horrifying face-to-face encounter with the shadow figure, he decides it's time to move out. Now the new owner, Meguru, documents his stay in the haunted bedroom for the paranormal team and captures this. Through an app, the current owner Ishihara was able to recreate a face similar to the one he saw that night. The man he drew is believed to be Suzuki, the previous owner who took his own life in the closet.